Welcome to the Stoic Golden Tribe, where enduring wisdom meets the strength of presence and where we uncover the truths modern society refuses to teach men. There is a kind of man who doesn't need to speak loudly to command a room. He doesn't need to prove himself, beg for respect, or compete for attention. His presence is power, his mind is disciplined, his thoughts are sharp, his silence unsettles those who live in chaos, and when he looks at the world, it looks away first. But this kind of mind isn't born, it's built, trained, forged through hardship, reflection, and purpose. In a world that constantly tries to distract you, enrage you, or soften you, the man who trains his mind becomes a fortress, a force, a natural intimidator, not because he seeks to control others, but because he fully controls himself. Throughout history, men who shaped empires, won love without chasing, and carried peace in the midst of war, us all had one thing in common, a mind that bowed to no fear. In this video, we're going deep. We'll explore the mental habits and emotional control that make you dangerous, in the best way. You'll hear stories of powerful men and women who built love on respect and reverence, not insecurity. You'll learn how emotional intelligence is the silent weapon of those who rise, and you'll walk away with the mindset that makes intimidation effortless, not forced. Like, share, subscribe, and drop a comment below, because what you learn here could change your life. Chapter 1. The calm that shakes the room. There's a kind of strength most men never discover. It's not in how much you can lift, how loud you speak, or how many people follow you. Real strength is when you walk into a room and your calm changes the temperature. Not because you force it, but because your mind is so trained, so rooted, and so silent that noise has no place near you. This is the kind of man who makes others nervous without trying. Not because he's aggressive, but because he's unshakable. And in a world where everyone's reacting, he's the one responding. Slowly, wisely, and with intention. One of the clearest examples of this mental power comes from the Roman general Scipio Africanus. While Hannibal was terrorizing Rome with brilliant battle tactics, it was Scipio who defeated him, not through louder commands or greater numbers, but through composure, strategy, and unbreakable clarity. His mind became the weapon. While others panicked, he prepared. While others responded emotionally, he stayed rooted in principle. That's what made him dangerous. The same is true in love and relationships. A man who doesn't chase, who doesn't beg, and who doesn't crumble when ignored, intimidates. Not because he's cold, but because his sense of self is not up for negotiation. Women sense this, the world senses this. It's the same force that draws people in and keeps them wondering how to earn your attention. Take the story of Frederick Douglass, a man born into slavery, beaten and humiliated, yet who trained his mind until it became a flame no one could extinguish. He taught himself to read when it was illegal. He sharpened his words until they became weapons of truth. And when he spoke, even the powerful trembled. Not because he yelled, but because he knew who he was and refused to shrink. Now ask yourself, how do you respond when disrespected? Do you react emotionally, or do you pause and let your silence speak? Do you get pulled into arguments, or do you see through them and remain steady? The man who trains his mind doesn't try to dominate. He becomes undeniable. The reason most men aren't naturally intimidating is because they're constantly over-explaining, overreacting, and overthinking. Their mental energy is scattered, their emotions leak, and people pick up on that instability, even without words. But when you become mentally disciplined, when you can sit with discomfort, when you stop chasing validation, when you master the art of waiting, you become the calm in every storm. And people notice. That's why it's not about posturing or fake confidence. It's about quiet certainty. It's about knowing exactly who you are and not needing anyone else to co-sign it. You don't raise your voice. You raise your standards. This chapter isn't about looking intimidating. It's about becoming powerful from the inside out. So that even when you say nothing, everything about you speaks, and what it says is, I am not here to perform, I am here to be. That's the energy women respect. That's the presence that other men think twice about crossing. That's the power that doesn't fade when trends change, because it's built on something real. Your job as a man is to build a mind that doesn't break when tested, a heart that doesn't chase when ignored, and a spirit that doesn't fold when threatened. Because once you master that, intimidation becomes natural, without trying, without forcing, without saying a word. Drop a comment below. I attract by being unmoved. Chapter 2. The Unshakable Standard. Why men who control themselves. Control everything. There is one trait that all powerful men share: emotional control. In battle, in business, and in love, the man who stays calm under pressure becomes the center of gravity. While others panic, he calculates. While others explode, he tightens his focus. While others drown in their feelings, he steers through them. Why? Because emotional control is the highest form of power, and the man who commands his emotions doesn't just impress people, he changes them. One of the clearest examples of this truth lies in the life of Marcus Aurelius, the last of the 5 good emperors of Rome. At any given moment, Marcus faced betrayal, political attacks, loss, and war, but read his journals, meditations, and you'll see a man more interested in mastering himself than controlling others. He didn't scream at the chaos, he stood still inside it. He wrote, he reflected, and he ruled from the inside out. That's what makes a man intimidating. Not his volume, but his centeredness, because the world can't push around a man who won't be moved, and the same principle applies to relationships. Men often think that if they just say the right things or act in a certain way, they'll earn a woman's attention. But they forget women are drawn not to words, but to energy. When a man remains calm while others fumble, she senses something rare. A presence that doesn't chase, doesn't perform, and doesn't collapse under emotional weight. Look at the story of Winston Churchill and his wife Clementine. Through the storms of war, criticism, and political pressure, Churchill was famously firm, but never emotionally frantic. Even when the world collapsed around him during World War II, he stayed composed. That steadiness wasn't just respected by nations, it was admired by his wife. His ability to carry pressure without projecting it onto others made him a force of security. Now here's where men miss it. They think controlling emotions means suppressing them. But suppression is weakness in disguise. Emotional control is about awareness and discipline. It's not denial, it's decision. You feel it, but it doesn't run you. You acknowledge it, but you don't hand it the steering wheel. That's why men who train their mind to recognize emotional patterns, fear, anger, jealousy, shame, and choose wisdom instead of reaction, become powerful beyond comprehension. People don't always know why they feel unsettled around them, but they do because such men cannot be manipulated. Think about it. Most manipulation tactics, from toxic women to petty enemies, rely on emotional hijacking. If they can trigger you, they can control you. If they can provoke you, they can lead you. But if they can't access your peace, they lose every time. This is why your standard must be unshakable, not just in how you let others treat you, but in how you treat yourself. The man with standards doesn't speak from emotion, he speaks from principle. And if emotion ever rises too high, he removes himself, regroups, and returns with clarity. Remember this, you cannot build a legendary life on unstable emotions. You cannot command love, respect, or influence if you're constantly being pulled by every wave of feeling. You must become the mountain in the middle of the storm. That's where true masculinity lives. So train yourself. When anger rises, breathe slower. When fear creeps in, ask better questions. When disrespect appears, don't react. Observe, because your response determines your reputation. And the man who controls himself doesn't need to control others. They naturally adjust to him. That's why the intimidating man is not always the loudest or the biggest. He's the one who sees through the noise, responds with wisdom, and never lowers his standard to match someone else's chaos. Emotional control is not just self-mastery, it's survival. And the man who builds that discipline builds a life that others can't shake. Drop a comment below. My standard is peace. Chapter 3. The power of walking away and why it echoes louder than words. If you ever want to test the strength of a man's mind, watch how he reacts when he has the power to walk away. Weak men argue, they beg, they cling, they compromise their dignity for the illusion of closeness or approval. But powerful men, men who've trained their minds, they walk away not out of pride but out of principle. And when they do, the silence that follows says everything, because nothing intimidates like restraint. Consider the story of Napoleon Bonaparte, a man known for his sharp military brilliance and unrelenting discipline. At the height of his power, he wasn't just feared because of his army, he was feared because of how quickly he could detach. He wasn't bound by emotion, he could cut ties, make hard decisions, and walk away from alliances, comforts, or desires that didn't serve his mission. That emotional separation made him unpredictable and powerful. In love, the dynamic is even more profound. There's a myth in modern relationships that chasing equals passion, but truthfully, the more a man chases, the less magnetic he becomes. Women don't respect a man who sacrifices his self-worth for their attention, but the man who can love deeply, give generously, yet and still walk away when his value is not honored, that man is unforgettable. Look at the powerful, haunting story of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and his muse, Charlotte Buff. Goethe fell deeply for her, but she was already engaged. He didn't beg or pursue her recklessly. Instead, he walked away with grace and wrote The Sorrows of Young Werther, a novel that moved nations and inspired hearts for generations. His pain became power. His love, though unfulfilled, became legendary, not because he possessed her, but because he respected himself enough to let go. Men often confuse walking away with weakness, but it's the opposite. Walking away means you've trained your mind to value peace over presence, self-respect over obsession. It means you are no longer ruled by scarcity, you are ruled by vision. Here's the truth no one tells you. Most people expect you to stay even when they mistreat you. That's how they measure your dependence. But the moment you walk, quietly, firmly, finally, you break the illusion. And that's when they start to reflect. That's when they realize they were in the presence of someone rare. This is the same energy that shifts dynamics at work, in social circles, and in relationships. People only take what you tolerate. But when your boundaries are non-negotiable and your peace is guarded like a kingdom, intimidation becomes your default setting, not because you're trying to dominate, but because your mind is so disciplined, so decisive, that others have no choice but to respect it. Emotional intelligence means you don't need to destroy bridges, you simply know when they lead nowhere. You don't fight to be understood. You understand yourself so deeply that misunderstanding is no longer your burden to carry. That's why the man who trains his mind to walk away when needed, not out of coldness, but clarity, becomes a storm that leaves no damage. Just presence, just memory, just silence. And that silence? It says, I am not here to prove my worth. I am here to live it. The ability to walk away from manipulation, from disrespect, from emotional traps, is not a reaction. It's a response rooted in deep mental strength. So, next time you're tested, next time your worth is questioned, don't argue, don't chase, don't plead. Just straighten your back, tighten your peace, and walk like a man who knows exactly what he brings to the world. Because the men who can walk are the ones who never have to. Drop a comment below. I walk away like a king. Chapter 4. Stillness over strategy. How presence alone can shift the balance of power. There's a kind of strength that doesn't require movement, tactics, or words. It's the kind of strength you find in a man who knows exactly who he is. A man who doesn't need to plan how to be respected because his very presence demands it. This is the final stage of mental training. When intimidation becomes natural, not through action, but through stillness. Throughout history, the men who changed the game weren't always the ones who made the most noise. They were the ones who knew how to pause, they knew how to observe, they knew how to speak last, and only when necessary. Because when your presence is powerful, your silence is louder than other people's speeches. Think of George Washington. He didn't chase leadership, it chased him. He didn't seek to become the first president of the United States. His discipline, humility, and unwavering stillness in crisis made him the only man the people trusted. And when his time in office ended, he walked away from power voluntarily. That act alone stunned the world. His restraint became legendary. This same energy applies to relationships. Most men think they have to entertain a woman to be valued. They think they have to be constantly proving, texting, performing. But what if I told you the man who makes her feel safe in silence, who doesn't rush to fill every gap with words, is the one she respects most? When a man is secure in himself, his energy fills the room without needing to announce itself. She can feel it, and more importantly, she responds to it, not because he's doing more, but because he's mastered the art of being still, being intentional, being undeniably grounded. Picture this, a man locked away for nearly 3 decades. The world forgot his name, but he never forgot who he was. When the gates finally opened, he didn't rush out with rage. He stepped out with presence, calm, focused, unshaken. And when he spoke, nations listened, not because he was loud, but because he had learned to master his mind in silence. That's the kind of power that can't be taught in books. It's forged in solitude. It's the quiet storm that commands rooms and shifts history, not through force, but through unshakable presence. That is the final form of mental discipline, when your stillness speaks louder than the world's noise. You want to intimidate? You want to shift the room without saying a word? Then learn how to sit with your emotions before you project them. Learn how to feel the pressure and not let it break your rhythm. Learn how to lock into the moment without needing attention, approval, or applause. Because the man who is rooted moves the world without moving at all. Here's the deeper truth. Power doesn't chase. It chooses. Power doesn't explain. It stands. Power doesn't yell. It whispers, and people lean in to hear it. That's why you must train your mind to be still. That's where discernment lives. That's where strength gathers. That's where clarity sharpens. And that's where intimidation, the kind that leaves people speechless, becomes your natural frequency. You won't need to argue to prove your point. You won't need to raise your voice to gain respect. You won't need to follow trends to be seen, because you'll already know my stillness is not weakness. It's the mark of a man who doesn't need the world to affirm what he already believes about himself. That's the final level of emotional intelligence. Not just managing emotions, but mastering your presence.
And when you get there, everything changes. You become the man other men look to in chaos. You become the man women feel safe around without knowing why. You become the man no one dares to play games with. Because your power is no longer a performance. It's who you are. Drop a comment below. My stillness speaks for me. The world doesn't hand power to men. It tests them. It shakes them. It tempts them to react, to chase, to lose themselves in the noise. But the men who rise, the men who stand tall without raising their voice, who walk away without fear, who command respect with their stillness, those are the men who have trained their minds. And make no mistake, that kind of man isn't born. He's built. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to prove yourself to be worthy. When your mind is calm, your standard is high, and your peace is untouchable. Intimidation becomes your quiet companion. It's not about being feared, it's about being felt. So remember this. Control yourself, or the world will control you. Master your emotions, or they will master your life. Move like a man who doesn't need permission. Speak like a man who knows his words have weight. And live like a man who refuses to be moved by anything less than purpose. Because when your mind is trained, your presence does the talking. If this message spoke to your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with a man who needs this reminder. Subscribe to the channel for more truth, strength, and clarity. And drop a comment below. My stillness speaks for me. We'll see you in the next one.